Welcome back, everybody, to the latest episode of the Outer Rim Ramblin' with myself, the outlaw Adam Neeson, joined as always with the Jedi Knight Danny Bryan. Danny, how are you, man?
I'm all good. I'm all good. How are you, Adam?
I'm good, man. We're currently recording on a lazy Sunday, and I wish I could have slept in, but I need to pay the bills. Need
I
to do
just,
the devil's work.
you know what? I didn't even have work today, but I got up early and I gave the house a good tidy and went to the gym. So I feeling very productive today.
Hmm.
hmm
S
hmm
Speaking of productive men,
Oh,
special guest today. Everybody in the audience loves when we have a guest because it means we won't be talking
we
shit.
we stay focused. We don't ramble too much.
A special guest today, we have Joe Corroney coming all the way from Oklahoma.
That's right. Hey guys, how's it going?
Joe, are you originally from Oklahoma?
No, no. So I'm born and raised in Indiana, and then I ended up going to Ohio for art college and lived in Ohio for most of my adult life, and then I just recently moved to Oklahoma a little over a year ago.
And how's the weather there? I know it sounds
Oh,
boring, but I'm interested.
yeah, it's warm. I'm about 3 hours north of Dallas, Texas, and
Mm.
Texas gets pretty hot. The weather here is nice. I mean, it doesn't get too cold. Maybe January, February gets a little chilly, but for the most part, I mean, it's my kind of weather. Like I'm not a cold weather person, so I like the weather here, but we do have to deal with lots of tornadoes and tornado season. So, like luckily where I live is just outside of Oklahoma City. So, but the tornadoes still come pretty close during tornado season. So that gets it's a new experience for me. So,
I always think it's crazy whenever we're talking to people and they talk about like the extreme weathers they have, and here it's like, aye, we have a wild big gust of wind, and that's about the
yeah.
extent of it. We don't get tornadoes or any real extreme weather.
Right.
I think one of the biggest storms we had was in January this year, and our fence came down, and we were all like, "Oh my God, it's the end of the world!" And it's like, no, there's people in the world that have to deal with tornadoes. That's great. I think, Adam, we can finally say all of our podcasts so far. We started by saying it's really hot here in Ireland, like it's wild hot. But here, it's getting chilly, Adam. It's getting wild chilly.
I've got the old blankets out. That's how you know it's bad.
That's like getting the hoodies are coming out.
For the Star Wars peeps in the audience that don't know Joe, you definitely know his artwork. Joe is some of the most beautiful Star Wars art. Well, not just Star Wars, but for the purpose of the podcast, Star Wars artwork I've ever seen. Because I watched a vlog of someone going around a Comic-Con a few months ago and immediately was like, who's that guy? Who did that art? Because it's so eye-catching and so different in a sense that it's like collage based, but it's got the characters and the sort of you bring in characters that you don't really see on posters that much. The one I'm thinking of in my head right now is like Shin Hati from Ahsoka, and it's like making her so striking in the middle with the rest of the characters around them. I was like, oh, I need that. I need that on my wall.
That's one. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Thanks for all the kind words, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, yeah. Shin Hati is a favorite character of mine recently from the Ahsoka series. As soon as I saw her in action in the show, I was like, I've got to do something with her and with her and Baylan Skoll too. So yeah, that was licensed artwork I did for Lucasfilm. It was like a promotional poster that came out during San Diego Comic-Con a couple years ago, back when the series came out. So yeah, thank you. The Shin Hati poster I did was one of my favorite pieces of late.
And just to sort of get into it, we sort of always ask our guests, how did you sort of fall in love with Star Wars? Was it as a kid? Was you get, when you got a bit older, did you like, so me and Danny's always loved it. I loved it as a kid, sort of fell out of love in the teenage age. And then like now post COVID, it's like, oh, this is my life now. I want Star Wars everything.
Right. So yeah, I mean, to answer your question, Star Wars has been a part of my life since 1977. It's really responsible for everything in my life. I mean, it's in my DNA. It's part not just what I do for a living, but it Star Wars has brought me friendships and other career opportunities, and it's been a constant in my life. So having grown up with it, I was barely 4 years old when I saw it in the theater, and to be that young to see Star Wars at that age, it was the first movie I remember seeing in the theater that I vividly remember seeing in the theater, and it really just changed my life completely. Even it's almost like I didn't have a choice really because I was so young. It put me on a path with I mean, not just the movie, but like I grew up as a kid of the 70s and 80s, right? So I had the Kenner Star Wars action figures. I grew up during the classic trilogy era. I aged with those movies. So by the time Return of the Jedi came out, I was at the perfect age for that too. I honestly can't remember a day in my life without Star Wars kind of being on my mind or somehow just in my life as a constant. I ended up going to art college and, studying for a degree in illustration. I knew in art college that there wasn't a whole lot of Star Wars coming out during the after Return of the Jedi until the special editions. And I graduated in 1996. Well, technically it was December of 95, but I ended up wanting to do Star Wars art, and there wasn't a lot out there, like in terms of like opportunities. I was already getting published as a comic book illustrator while I was in art college, but as soon as I graduated, I pursued whatever work I could find with Star Wars. And there was Dark Horse Comics, there were some other publishers, but I ended up doing illustrations for the Star Wars role-playing game from West End Games, which was an older role-playing game, but I'd already been collecting those books since like junior high. So I was familiar with their books. I sent artwork to the publisher. They hired me. I illustrated for about 12 different books. And this was all right before the special editions had even come out. So that's when the Star Wars nostalgia like really kicked in again big time in 97. And then of course, 2 years later, The Phantom Menace came out and then Star Wars just blew up all over again. So it was a big deal for me my whole life, even before, the hype train took off again in the late 90s. Yeah, I've just been lucky to be, to pursue it for a career and to get in on it early with my artwork officially through Lucasfilm. And then from there, I would end up getting more and more opportunities with Lucasfilm and different licensors and publishers.
I like on your Wikipedia entry, there's just a fantastic quote from you about the Lucasfilm inhibitor chip
Oh,
and where
yeah.
you were kind of like smuggled in and, walking around the Ewok lake and stuff. So how was that, were you approached by Lucasfilm or did you sort of write to them saying, I've always wanted to work on? How did that kind of come about for you?
Well, really, it all started with me sending my portfolio, and this is before really days, like a couple years before the internet really took off. So I was having to send stuff in snail mail, like the old way, in a packet in an envelope. And I sent samples to a publisher that had the Star Wars license, right? So, which was West End Games, and they were publishing these Star Wars game books and companion source books and all these gaming materials, which I was already familiar with as a fan, and they had lots of illustrations in them. And I remember thinking back then, like, oh, this artwork's not that bad. I could actually do something comparable to this or maybe even better. So it was a matter of me sending my portfolio out to different publishers, which I still did, like for Dark Horse and other companies that had the Star Wars license. And getting in with Lucasfilm, or it was more getting in with the publishers first. And then Lucasfilm noticed my artwork. And then from there, they offered me some opportunities directly to work with them on Star Wars over the years. And then, but even right away, I think after I did the West End Game stuff, that led to me doing stuff for Star Wars Insider magazine, who I illustrated a lot of short fiction and different articles for the magazine. Star Wars Insider is the official fan club magazine, which is published by Lucasfilm. So I ended up getting in with that publisher and that licensor who worked with Lucasfilm on that magazine. And then that led to me doing stuff directly for Lucasfilm. So this was all within, from like 96, 97, and all the way up to like 2001, 2002. And then I worked with Star Wars Insider off and on for about 15 years. But during that time, I was also doing stuff for Star Wars art for many different companies too. So yeah, what happens with me is people see my artwork when I go to conventions, like, oh, I've seen that art before, or and they don't know who I am, or they may not know my name, but they might recognize something I did in a Star Wars Insider magazine, or maybe in one of the Star Wars books, or maybe I've done tons of work for the trading cards for Topps. So like Star Wars Galaxy, which is like a trading card set that features lots of different artists. So yeah, I mean, I've done tons of Star Wars art over the last 30 years. Just, it's not just from the comic books. It's not just from the games. It's not just from the trading cards. It's from all over the place. But lately, the last 5 years or so, it's been mostly doing Star Wars posters for like a lot of the Disney Plus shows.
I suppose as you say, you've been drawing Star Wars and you've wanted to draw Star Wars from day dot. But do you remember
hmm
what your first kind of like paid commissioned Star Wars piece was? The very first thing?
Well, I mean, it was for West End Games for the Star Wars role-playing game. I remember the very first drawing I did because I was so excited to be doing a Star Wars illustration that I knew was going to be published in a Star Wars book, right? So as an art student in art college studying for my degree in illustration, I mean, I was already getting published as a comic book artist for some independent companies while I was still in school, like my sophomore, junior year of art college, my second and third year. But as soon as I graduated, I ended up getting in touch with the publisher for the role playing game, and I remember them calling and leaving a message on my voicemail and saying, "Hey, we got your samples in the mail. We love your art. We'd love to hire you to do some illustrations for us." And I remember my knees were shaking listening to this voicemail. I was so excited because this was, I mean, Star Wars was, I don't know, it was everything to me, especially at that point too. It is now even more so, but even back then, like having grown up with it and having it inspire me to want to become an artist in the first place. I mean, it goes back to getting, collecting the figures. But when I came home from seeing the film, my mom had gotten me the Marvel Comics adaptation of the movie, right? And it was a big oversized Treasury edition. So they had the regular comics, which I had, but they also had these larger, they called them Treasury Edition size comics they would do as special things occasionally. And I had that for Star Wars and from Marvel. And I sat there and looked at that and just drew the characters from the comic as a kid because that was kind of how I relived the movie was through the comic books and the action figures. This was long before VHS was accessible. That would happen, a little later in the 80s. And then, now we have Star Wars on demand. But back then, as a kid, to relive Star Wars, we did it with the toys and the comics. And for me, it was using my imagination to draw the characters and looking at my action figures and drawing Boba Fett and looking at the comic books and drawing the characters from there. So yeah, it's just been a pretty big deal my whole life. Then getting to college, art college, and having roommates who love Star Wars too. And this was in our 20s, and this is right before the special editions. So we were already on that nostalgia high because I was meeting like-minded friends and artists who were like, "Wait, you're a Star Wars?" You got to remember, everyone's a Star Wars fan these days 'cause it's so big. Disney has blown it up so huge. But back then, Star Wars was huge. Don't get me wrong. But to find other people in social circles who were just as passionate. I mean, that was something special. And so my roommates and I would watch Star Wars on VHS in college. We would, watch those movies over and over. And I was, it was just amazing to kind of to have friends that were as into it as I was, and then being able to work on it eventually officially shortly thereafter.
Yeah, I think that's why Adam and I kind of started this podcast together. As you say, Star Wars is massive now, but
Hmm.
Adam and I both have sort of done podcasts and stuff together for different groups, and then we're both part of like a horror film club, which
Oh
Frank
yeah.
up behind me here. But
Yeah.
I think I was invited on another podcast that Adam does to talk about the 25th anniversary release of Phantom Menace,
Hmm.
and we were just afterwards, we're like, that was good fun. That was good fun talking about Star Wars, wasn't it? And that kind of in turn birthed this. So I think, as you say, when you find your people, your Star Wars
Yeah,
people,
yeah.
it's a great feeling when you find people who are on that kind of same wavelength as you. And I would say, as
Right.
you were also like, I assume from what you said earlier about role playing games, I take it you were
Mhm.
doing a lot of kind of role playing and stuff at that time, and then to have Wayland kind of call you and be like, "Hey, you want to work with us not only on Star Wars but also role playing games." That must have been incredible for you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and it really was, but I think having those friendships in college that kept that Star Wars passion that I already had just amplified it even more, and just because I think in school and as you're becoming a young adult, you can get distracted by a lot of things. But I mean, I knew I wanted to be an artist, and I knew I wanted to be an illustrator. That's what I was going to school, and I knew I wanted to be a comic book artist for sure. So I was already doing that in school. So I felt like there's got to be somewhere that's somebody that's doing Star Wars art or that's publishing Star Wars books or something. I knew of Dark Horse Comics, but and I did submit to them as well. I ended up working for them later, but at that time I wasn't quite ready yet. I was still in my very early stages of my art career at that point, right? Still in school. But yeah, getting to work on Star Wars officially right after I graduated with my degree, I didn't take it for granted. It was a dream come true. But then again, like looking back, it was such a small little piece, a tiny, but it was my first steps like into a larger world, like Obi-Wan says, because I was getting to do official Star Wars art for the role-playing game, but it's not like that was like a huge deal outside of Star Wars fans that actually knew about the game, which a lot of people didn't know about the game. So, but it did lead to other bigger and better things. It was just sort of a stepping stone, and over the next 20 some years or so, it led me on this path to doing what I do now for Star Wars and doing lots of other projects too for different studios and publishers.
Working with Lucasfilm for over 25 years now, is there a notable difference in working with them for and after the Disney sort of merger?
Yeah, I mean, the transition was pretty smooth in terms of like it didn't because I'm a freelance illustrator. I don't work like full time for Lucasfilm, but I work for their either I work for them directly sometimes or I'll work for their licensors for, mostly is what I in publishing and licensing. So I didn't really notice a whole lot of change necessarily, especially at first, like 10 years ago when it happened. It just really right away, the thing I noticed was like, oh, there's just more people that have to approve things now. So instead of it going straight to Lucasfilm and then back to me, then it goes to like Lucasfilm or it goes to Disney, then Lucasfilm, and then it has to go through a few more cooks in the kitchen basically. Over the years, I mean, I've noticed a little bit more in terms of how just some it's I don't want to say it's like minute things necessarily, but there have been some small changes in terms of like how accessible maybe reference for a new project might be because Disney tends to be, well, I mean, and rightfully so, because of the way the internet is now, especially these days, things tend to be on lockdown a lot tighter than they used to be. Not that they weren't before, but when I was working directly with Lucasfilm, there was a lot more leniency in terms of like, oh, we're just going to send you this stuff, top secret stuff, right? Like, here's part of the script to the movie, or here's a whole bunch of images that you need to paint from. It's still like that. It's a little bit like getting to get certain things that I might need it's a little bit more like pulling teeth a little bit more. So there are some differences where the security is a bit more complicated. The approvals can be a bit more complicated or time consuming. But at the same time, I've been doing Star Wars for so long and I know it so well because it's in my DNA. It's pretty much all I think about. So when I do Star Wars projects, there's usually very little that needs to get adjusted. If there's anything, it might be little tweaks here and there, but for the most part, Lucasfilm and the licensors trust me for the most part to kind of get it right the first time. It's just a matter of like, okay, do I have the right reference? Do I need some additional things? Do I have to poke some extra people to get it? Kind of a thing. So
Well, it is that thing too that like you worked for the old guard, so you've come in to the new Disney era, and it's sort of like, well, you're clearly a trusted name. You're
right.
a trusted guy that can do the work efficiently. It's not like you're gonna draw an Ahsoka poster and just put Max Rebo in the bottom of it. As much as
Right,
I would
right.
love that.
Yeah, they do give me creative freedom to kind of, try some things and which is not, I mean, obviously they do give me a lot of freedom, but at the same time, I know where like, I know the canon, I know the characters, I know the shows and movies. So I kind of, and sometimes I'll put in my 2 cents on something. And especially if it's like the Disney side of the approval, they're like, wow, how did you, like, that's really cool. You knew that. And I'm like, I've been working with like, I've worked in the expanded universe of Star Wars for a long time before Disney came in. So I know, and just as a fan because I read this stuff and I mean I don't read everything. I can't read all the novels and all the comics, but I did, I have embraced a lot of it in my career and as a fan as a young age. And so I do know a lot of the a lot of the expanded universe details and all the mythology and the lore. So I think sometimes when I add my 2 cents to something, they're like, wow, that's a great idea. That's cool that you know that. And I'm like, thanks. I'm a Star Wars fan, so
Just we mentioned Max Rebo there. Is there any character or any alien or anything in Star Wars that you haven't drawn yet that you're kind of like, this is the one thing I've not done yet that you maybe want to, or have maybe you haven't even thought, but now that it's kind of being put to you? Is there anything in Star Wars you haven't done?
Well, I mean, there's a lot actually. I mean, Star Wars is so massive, and plus, since Disney has blown it up even bigger since they came in, I mean, we've had so much content, right? I mean,
Mhm.
so much. I mean, compared to pre-Disney, Star Wars was. I mean, we still had a lot of content once the prequels came out. I mean, not as, I mean, nothing like now, but I mean, we had the Clone Wars. We had some other things that came out. Now that there's been, so much, it's really like I ingest, I devour it all as a fan, but there's still stuff and characters, even from the new era, I haven't been able to play with yet because it's a matter of scheduling and it's a matter of timing. And so, I mean, yeah, I've done some stuff for like Star Wars Rebels, like sketch cards and drawings and things, but I really haven't, and I love Rebels and I haven't done any like paintings or posters for Star Wars Rebels or even, for example, Andor. Like I've been trying to get some Andor projects going, and I just haven't had the chance to do anything for that series yet. I'm trying to rectify that currently. I'm hopefully something will come out next year that I'm hoping to get approved. Since everything I try to do as approved license work through Lucasfilm. I don't really do a whole lot of fan art. I mean, occasionally I will do something for fun and put it out there, but I try to keep I like to get everything I do published and recognized officially, just, as for my own satisfaction and for Lucasfilm's satisfaction. So, but yeah, there's other stuff like, I mean, I get asked that, hey, do you have any artwork for the Acolyte? And I was like, no, I enjoyed the Acolyte, and I'd really love to do something with the Stranger character, but I haven't done anything for him yet either. So there's just so many of a lot of the new stuff that I'm still trying to get to, but sometimes it just depends on what they offer me too, like the licensors I work with. So it's like last year I did a couple posters for Revenge of the Sith for the 20th anniversary, because that was a big deal. Well, actually, sorry, this year. Those just came out a few months ago. So I worked on them late last year into early this year, and then they came out at San Diego Comic-Con. But I was really hoping to do some other posters for some other, like Andor, for example. But Lucasfilm was like, oh, we want you to work on these Revenge of the Sith 20th anniversary. I'm like, okay, cool. I mean, I love Star Wars. I'm happy to do it. So yeah, it depends on what comes through, what they offer me, kind of a thing. So
Me and Danny have threatened to write a Lobot script. I'm just saying, Joe, we might need a poster.
Lobot. Yeah, no, he's a classic character. I've actually done some Lobot art over the years, sporadically in different. I think going all the way back to the role playing game for Weston Games, I actually got to work with Lobot on some projects, so that was kind of fun. I've been drawing him in a long time though.
On the role play stuff, do you kind of how does that work? Do they just kind of give you an outline of the characters and stuff that will maybe appear in that book or that add-on? Or do they have scenarios and you draw bits of scenarios? Like how does that, just because again I do like role, I haven't actually done any Star Wars role playing yet. I would play some D&D in that, but it's just I've always wondered how, in terms of the artwork that features in those and the artists who do that, are you kind of given like an overview of the narrative that'll maybe be featured in that book, or are you just kind of told characters, or how does that work?
It just depends on the book and the project with the role playing game. And this is going back to the late 90s, early 2000s when I was doing artwork for the Star Wars role playing game for West End Games, but also for Wizards of the Coast as well, when they ended up getting the license after that. I mean, back then, it wasn't really any, I guess, too different than other kinds of book publishing projects. I mean, for the role playing game, I remember it being, for the most part, pretty loose in terms of like, let me think, like, oh, we need this kind of alien for doing this in a particular scene. We need a Jedi fighting some battle droids, but I got to create what the Jedi looked like. Sometimes they might have a specific kind of background in mind or more specific details. But I mean, for the most part, sometimes it would be very specific scenes and characters that they would need for an illustration. Other times it's like, hey, we have this smuggler mechanic character, can you design what he looks like, make him a human or make him an alien or whatever. So it wasn't anything like that hard necessarily or that specific. It's not like working in like comic books where you get a script and a breakdown of the story from page to page, and there's very specific beats that you have to hit and very specific characters that you have to draw, right? So with the publishing stuff on the role-playing game, I mean, there was a lot of freedom to create, and I created a lot of new aliens, a lot of new costumes and ships all the time. So that was, and again, this is going back to the mid 90s when it was just Lucasfilm and the early, I don't want to say it wasn't, I guess it's kind of the early days of the expanded universe in the sense that, I mean, yeah, there had been an expanded universe since the first Star Wars novel, basically, from Alan Dean Foster. But, the mid 90s, we're still in the early era of the expanded universe. So I got to create and design, and they were just, oh, we need a new species, we need a new planet, we need a new ship, so it wasn't there was a lot of freedom to create. And then I'd say now, with even though the old canon is now Legends, still when you're creating in the new era of Star Wars, you're still given freedom to create. But now I'd say now what I do mostly, because it's all licensed work involving established TV shows and movies and characters, so I don't really have the opportunity to create new stuff like I used to. But I know, like, I have friends who work in the comics, and they're making stuff all the time, so that has to get approved, obviously. So, but yeah, it's for the role playing game. It was definitely, it wasn't stringent. At times, it would be a little more specific what they would want, but for the most part, there was a lot of openness and freedom to create like Star Wars characters and scenes and stories.
Yeah, that's very cool.
To take you back to 1999 and with the Phantom Menace coming out, how heavy did you go on buying every toy that
Oh
came out?
God. Yeah, I was there at opening night at Toys R Us when they did, it wasn't called Force Friday then. I forget what they called it. But yeah, I was there on Friday at midnight, or I think it was a Friday night. I know it was midnight. Me and a buddy went to Toys R Us, and yeah, I mean, it was, we're talking, yeah, early 1999 before the movie came out. And the hype. I mean, you got to remember there was not a Star Wars movie for almost 20 years, but from Return of the Jedi to The Phantom Menace. So the Star Wars hype was just astronomical. Like, I mean, I know like the hype for The Force Awakens was pretty big because there was a 10-year gap from Revenge of the Sith to, the last live action film to The Force Awakens. But in that period, we did have the Clone Wars. We did have other Star Wars content. So it wasn't, Star Wars hadn't disappeared as much during that period that it did really from 1983 to 1999. I mean, there was stuff that was coming out, back in those early days, but like fans of my generation, we refer to it as the dark times because there wasn't like a lot of, I mean, you could still buy some Star Wars stuff, but it had kind of just disappeared off the pop culture spectrum. I mean, there were fans that kept it alive, like me and my friends who still watched it on VHS. We would still buy the comics. Kenner did put out the Power of the Force figures in 1995. So like, oh wow, Star Wars figures are coming back. That's really fun. And of course, we went crazy for those. Oh, we would do toy runs in college. We would, go to Toys R Us and go to all the different stores just hunting those Power of the Force figures. Because again, we were in our early 20s. We were right at that perfect age for nostalgia to kick in. Yeah, we were going crazy for Star Wars toys when those came back out. But then the Phantom Menace, yeah, I mean, that was a whole other level of hype because it was all around the first live action Star Wars film. So, I mean, the special editions when those came out in 97 to kind of preempt the release of the Phantom Menace, the special editions were huge too. I mean, that was a pretty big deal. But the Star Wars hype back then, it was just off the charts. Like from like 97 to 99 leading up to the Phantom Menace, it was all people could talk about. It was a big deal. So
Your artwork, I would say, just sort of looking through your Instagram and just the artwork I've seen of yours, I would say that there's a lot of like Drew Struzan in there, is what
mhm.
I kind of get. But what sort of influences, what kind of artists or different art pieces you've seen kind of has influenced your art?
Well, so I grew up as a fan, obviously, of Drew Struzan, because as a kid, I would go to the cinema all the time with my dad. We would go like, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week to go to the movies. So I would see growing up, I would see those illustrated movie posters from Drew. Even before I knew who he was, I was just like mesmerized by his work. But even going back further than that, growing up with the Marvel Star Wars comics are what really captivated me, along with, the film itself. But the comic books that Marvel were putting out for Star Wars, that introduced me to the world of comic book art and what comic books were. So my earliest influencers are comic book artists, growing up in the late 70s, early 80s. And I had collected I mean, I still sort of collect comics, but most of my comic collecting from when I was a kid all the way up through college, I mean, I was inspired by so many different comic book illustrators. But then even going back to Star Wars, for me, it's Ralph McQuarrie, having grown up, basically seeing his art for the first time on the Topps trading card. So back when the movies were coming out when I was a kid, Topps would put out trading cards for the Star Wars films. And I remember as a kid getting these trading cards they featured his concept paintings. And I didn't know they were paintings. I remember looking at his artwork on these trading cards thinking, are these like alternate versions of scenes from the like I don't remember this scene from the movie, or I don't remember creatures or the characters looking quite like this. So I was fascinated with his concept art because it showed to me a variation on what I had already known in the films. But that turned me on to Ralph's artwork, or making me aware of like, oh, he's a concept painter for the Star Wars films. I mean, really, it was his artwork that sort of laid the foundation for Star Wars along with George's script. So for me, it goes back to Ralph McQuarrie growing up, you know, understanding and studying his artwork. And then, of course, Drew Struzan, who is an incredible movie poster illustrator. And then lots of comic book artists that I really admired growing up, that I tried to emulate early on in my career to develop my own style and my own storytelling. So I would say those are the three sort of primary influences for me.
It must be cool now with the likes of Mandalorian, you're seeing Ralph's artwork really coming to life in Mandalorian
Yeah.
with the ice spider that you saw from the
Yeah.
Dagobah concept
Mm.
art, and
Yeah.
we've now seen the snowtroopers without the mouth apron. You're getting that Ralph McQuarrie snowtrooper helmet. I think it's cool to kind of, as you say, you look at Ralph's art and you're like, that's incredible, and you can see its influence on the original trilogy. But now to see it actually as he drew it on the screen
Right.
is really cool.
Yeah, I love that Lucasfilm, especially in the Disney era, are going back to Ralph's concepts. I mean, that's something Doug Chiang was already doing with the prequels when he was designing for, Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith. I mean, Doug was very much a student of Ralph McQuarrie's artwork. I mean, way more so than even I was. I mean, Doug really tried to emulate Ralph's style. So there's a lot of Ralph's influence in the prequels, but even, jumping ahead now, you're watching even in the Disney movies like The Force Awakens, like when the area where we were first introduced to Rey on Jakku, and they have that big arch that where she's cleaning all the junk and she's working on the little pieces when we're really first introduced to her after she's been scavenging. And that big brown archway comes right out of one of Ralph's paintings for Jabba's palace exterior from one of Ralph's concept paintings. And just seeing stuff like that where they take a really cool design, go, that would work really well for this location. Or, yeah, or in The Mandalorian, seeing like a lot of his characters and designs pop up. Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, as a hardcore Star Wars fan, but also as someone who appreciates Ralph and his work. And yeah, that's even a big treat for me.
Just onto other artist who talking. You mentioned about your work with Tops, but I think one of the
Hmm.
first projects you did was the 2004 Clone Wars, the Tartovsky's
Yeah.
Clone Wars stuff, and I'm a big fan. I've got, I don't know if you can see that, like tattoos
Oh,
of
it's a
Durg and
dirge. Yeah.
Dooku,
Yeah.
and
Nice.
yeah,
Nice.
so I'm a massive fan of the
Hmm.
two seasons that we got of his. But so going then to that art style and getting to be involved with the Tops cards for that, how did that kind of come about, and what was it like being involved with Star Wars? That I think that particular series is so unique in that it's a Tartovsky style. It's all very
Right.
Samurai Jack, Dexter's Lab, Powerpuff Girls. Very cartoony and bold and colorful compared to what we maybe had seen before for Star Wars.
Yeah, that was a totally different, like, I mean, if people aren't familiar with the Clone Wars micro series, it was an animated series that had come out about 4 years before the Clone Wars were more familiar with, obviously. And the micro series were these little, like, 2 to 3 minute snippets of episodes that were released weekly on Cartoon Network. But it was our first thing outside of the current, live action films we were getting with the prequels, that was at the time considered canon, at the time that was considered, just getting more Star Wars content outside of the films back then. That was a huge deal. And plus, Tartakovsky's style, from Samurai Jack and all these other things he had done, like that style just worked so great for Star Wars. It was so kinetic and over the top and exaggerated and larger than life. What he did with that cartoon series was really great. So getting to work on the sketch cards for the Clone Wars at that time, so I was always a fan of course, growing up as a Star Wars fan, and at this point already getting published as a Star Wars artist. By 2004, I was already well into working for Star Wars Insider magazine and doing other Star Wars projects here and there. I was a fan of Topps. They had a series called Star Wars Galaxy, which was a trading card set that always featured, like, it was an artist featured set that would have like lots of famous illustrators and comic book artists doing their take on Star Wars and using their imagination to create Star Wars scenes, right? They had already put out, like, over, I think from like the mid 90s to the late 90s, they had put out three of these Galaxy sets featuring like a lot of my favorite artists that I was really a big fan of. So I knew I would love to contribute. I was well aware of Topps and they had the Star Wars license, and I knew they did Star Wars trading cards. And I would go on to contribute to other Star Wars Galaxy sets, including even recently. I'm still working with Topps on Star Wars Galaxy sets. But back then, Topps was putting out these things called sketch cards for they were pretty new at the time. 2004, it was in the very, very early days of the whole sketch card phenomenon. They had done them previously. They've done sketch cards for their Marvel set. I remember they put out like a Daredevil or Marvel Daredevil trading card set. I had artists do sketches for that. And that was maybe a couple years earlier. And sketch cards were still like, they hadn't really completely caught on. They were just these loose sketches by, artists that Topps would hire, and they would put these cards into random packs of trading cards. If you go to the store, you buy a pack of Star Wars cards, it's kind of like the Willy Wonka golden ticket. You might pull a sketch card if you're lucky. And it might be a really good sketch card. It might be a sketch card by your favorite artist, you don't know. But basically, I got in with Topps because Steve Sansweet, who was working at Lucasfilm at the time, he was director of fan relations and he was in charge of Star Wars Celebration. Steve and I were already friends in terms of having me done work through Lucasfilm, and he recommended me to Topps because they were looking for artists to do sketch cards. There were only 13 artists doing sketch cards on that first set, but I was the only one who wasn't a Dark Horse Comics artist at that point yet. So they had all Dark Horse Comics artists doing Star Wars sketches for this Clone Wars sketch card series and that Topps was putting out. But they needed another artist because they needed more sketches. So basically Lucasfilm reached out to me and said, hey, can you jump in and contribute? Which I did. And then, of course, I ended up working about a year later. I ended up working for Dark Horse on the comics, but that's kind of how it happened. And I did like 1,000 sketches for that Clone Wars sketch. I drew a lot of battle droids, like a lot. Like it was just like, I was like, how fast can I draw a battle droid? And this was back when sketch cards were just scribbles. I mean, they were just like, I was doing more than a scribble, but most artists were just doing really quick doodles, right, and signing their name because it was a big deal just to get a scribble, from a well-known artist. These days, sketch cards are a totally different animal. They are much more involved. But I was part of that process of over the years. I worked on sketch cards for Topps from like 2004, from the very first sketch card set they did for Star Wars all the way up to like Force Awakens. So I was doing over 10 years of sketch cards, and I've drawn thousands of sketch cards. But as it went on, the more I did them, I would do less for each set. It went from doing like 1,000 to doing like 100 to doing like 25. And now it's like, okay, I'll do like maybe 20 sketch cards, but I'll just do them really, really nice as opposed to doing like 1,000 scribbles, basically. So, because it's just gotten so competitive in the whole sketch card, you have to at least put some effort into them if you want to get noticed. So,
Yeah. That's very cool. It's Tops and trading card aren't really a massive thing in the UK. Playing card, like Pokemon and
mhm.
Magic the Gathering and all that, Lorcana and stuff are all quite big. But in terms of like Tops, Galaxies, and the sketch cards and stuff, they're not really as big a thing, and they're not as easy to come by. So whenever I'm at a con or whatever, and I see maybe like a stack of the Star Wars Galaxy cards, I'm like, maybe I have to pick them up, because
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
it's
wow,
not
yeah.
as big a thing here. But yeah, when I seen that and seen that you'd contributed to the Tartovsky Clone Wars
hmm
series, I was like, ooh, because that's, as you said, the
Yeah.
miniseries is fantastic, and it's great that it got added to Disney Plus.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's every so often I'll just be like, oh, I'm gonna go watch that because I love how it seamlessly just goes into Revenge of the Sith.
hmm
The way it ends, it's just perfect. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it was fun drawing those characters, like drawing some of those characters in that Tartakovsky style. That was probably one of the first times I actually did something outside of my own style and where I was kind of adapting someone else's look for Star Wars characters. I can't think of it. I've done it since then for like Clone Wars and Rebels in the Disney era, where I've done that animated style where I drew to make it look like it was, that CG model. But back then, I think that was one of the first times I drew Star Wars licensing artwork in a style that wasn't mine, basically. So, but it was fun. I enjoyed like doing that simplified kind of cartoony style. But for the most part, I remember doing my sketch cards mostly in my style. But I think I did some in the animated style too.
Yeah. Well, that's, I mean, even our logo just shows how much of an influence it had on us
Oh
because
yeah, there it
we were like
is.
we had to get it done that way. But no, that's great. I think it's good to kind of get to do something outside of your norm, isn't it? It's good to
hmm
get to try something a bit
Oh,
different. But
yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
it's cool seeing, your, as you were saying, the Comic Con and the 25th anniversary Revenge of the Sith prints. You've got the Wookiees of Kashyyyk for the one print, and then you've got the droids over Coruscant for the second. You were saying that Lucasfilm kind of asked you to do that. They were like, we want you to
hmm
focus on Revenge of the Sith because of the anniversary. But did you have much say in what you were going to do for those posters? Did you get to choose the Kashyyyk and the Coruscant thing?
Yeah, actually, I did. I got a lot of freedom. So they really the only directive that came across my desk was we would like some new artwork to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Revenge of the Sith. So I was like, oh, okay. I was like, what characters? It really started with Grievous for me because I do a lot of conventions, I do a lot of events, and Grievous is such a popular character, especially for the younger Star Wars fans. They're like, "Oh, do you have anything General Grievous?" Right? So I'm always getting, and I have General Grievous art already, but I didn't really have anything more recent or newer with him. And I was like, if I'm gonna do Revenge of the Sith, I want to do something with General Grievous to spotlight him. So then that became like I started working on the design of Grievous and the battle droids, and I thought, oh, if I change it to like a landscape format, and if I put Grievous here and I put battle droids here, I thought, oh, maybe I can do like, maybe I can pitch Lucasfilm on a companion piece and I'll do like, a mirror image of Grievous and the battle droids versus Yoda and the Wookiees on Kashyyyk, right? So it's technically two different scenes from the movie. You've got the Battle of Coruscant with, which is really more of a spaceship battle, really, but technically, I mean, Tartakovsky cartoon, they do, you do see Grievous on Coruscant and stuff. But I mean, I do have the ships in the background, like some of the spaceships. I just wanted to thematically approach Grievous and the battle droids and then play that off of a Republic versus Separatist theme, basically. So I would like, oh, I'll do a Republic piece featuring Yoda and the Wookiees from Kashyyyk, and I'll design these two posters to kind of, just mirror each other and play off each other. So that's kind of how it happened. And then once I did the concepts, I sent them in, and they were like, oh yeah, we love the idea, we love these, go ahead. So, and it was also me just wanting to do more than one poster because when I get a project for Star Wars, it's for me, it's always like I tend to go above and beyond whenever I can because I just love it so much. So like even for like Star Wars Insider, when they would hire me to do like the short fiction stories I would illustrate, like, say like a Jaina Solo short story. They would pay me for maybe two illustrations, but I would do like I'd end up doing four and be like, "What do you guys think about these sketches? Maybe I could finish." Oh yeah, but we can't pay you anymore. I was like, "That's fine, I'll do them anyway." So I'd always end up doing more than what was kind of asked for me, and I with Star Wars, it's just something I do. I tend to like go, hey, what can is there something else, a higher place I can take this, or can I maybe get some more published artwork out of this project if I do this project. So that's just kind of it makes me happy as a fan to paint and draw Star Wars as much as I can.
And Joe, with your style, it's very photorealistic. How do you sort of approach a piece like that? Because I know someone like, say, Alex Ross will take photographs of himself in
hmm
the pose he wants, with the lighting he wants, or do you sort
hmm
of approach it in that style? Do you approach from the figures, from just still images?
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of things, really. I'd say most of the work I've done over the last 5 years for Star Wars has been mostly licensing art for posters. And in that case, I am getting a lot of photo reference images from Lucasfilm where they're like, if I'm working on a Shin Hati poster for Ahsoka, they'll send me, maybe 10 or 12 different images of her, and I'll kind of just pick and choose with what I want to work with or all the other characters that are in the poster. And I kind of design based off of those reference images. Also, in some of, like in my Thrawn art, artwork I did for a few years ago for Lucasfilm, did a Thrawn poster that was inspired by Star Wars Rebels, but I did it in my more realistic style, right? So it's not the cartoon style, it's more my style, but there wasn't any reference that really existed of a live action, at least at that time. This was before Ahsoka had come out, of Thrawn sitting in his command chair, commanding a bunch of TIE fighters. I had to use a variety of references to create that image, whether it's looking at like some of the Thrawn statues or like even just photo reference of someone sitting in a chair. I don't usually shoot myself, but over the years, many, many times, I have friends who have Star Wars costumes, are incredible cosplayers, people in the 501st Legion. I have friends in the Rebel Legion. They have these incredible, or even the Mandalorian Mercs, they have these incredible Star Wars costumes. And a lot of times I'll be at an event or I know a friend where I'll, ping them online, say, hey, can you take some photos of you in this costume, like this kind of pose, just as sort of a starting or jumping off point. But early on in my career, I definitely did that a lot more for my Star Wars art, where I would use my friends in their costumes as reference, or I would, yeah, definitely use all kinds of other ways to draw and paint these characters. I'm trained as a comic book artist, so I know how to draw from my imagination. So, I can draw and sketch on paper. Not everything I do has to be super realistic necessarily, but because of mostly what I've been doing the last 5 years has been Star Wars posters. They, for the licensing side for the posters, Disney prefers the more realistic likeness. So I'm usually working from photo references that they provide, but sometimes I do have to use my ingenuity to create like a pose or something.
And just in a selfish reason for myself, I'm a big comic book guy. Is there a character, doesn't have to be Star Wars, could be Marvel, DC, or anything. Is there a character that just you love to draw? Like, is there like Spider-Man, Batman? Is there somebody that just like,
Yeah, Batman. I
yeah,
mean, I grew up, I'm a huge Batman guy. So I grew up collecting the Batman comics. I mean, I still do. I still collect Batman occasionally. And I love, all the films, of course. I'm a big fan of the films. Batman was my go-to when I would sketch in school and art college. And even now, like sometimes there's something just iconic and kinetic about drawing where I can draw him quickly if I'm at a comic book convention for a fan or something. It's like, the design it's simple, but it's also bold and immediately recognizable. So Batman's for me he's such a great character as a fan. I love the character, but he's also a lot of fun to draw as well. But having yeah, I'm a big comic book guy too. So I mean, Batman, the X-Men. I love Wolverine especially. I'm a huge Wolverine fan. So I grew up in the era when Wolverine was first introduced to the comics, and me and my friends were like, "Oh my God, who is this character? He's awesome!" And then watching that character evolve and just become what he is today just blows my mind. That this obscure X-Men character that came out in the early '80s, and now all of a sudden, like he's just yeah. Whereas Batman's kind of been around a lot longer, and of course he's a huge deal. But yeah, I'd say Batman and Wolverine. I used to draw Wolverine all the time too.
do you prefer Wolverine in the blue and the yellow or the yellow and the tan?
I'm a John Byrne guy, so I love the yellow and tan, the
Eh,
brown and tan. So, I mean, I was first introduced to him in the yellow with the tiger stripes, right? When he's fighting the Hulk. I don't have those comics. I remember reading the comics as a kid. I didn't get those issues. A friend of mine had those comics, but I was collecting X-Men when he was introduced into that series. And then when John Byrne did his run on the book and then the other artists after him, I mean, that to me, the brown and tan, it's just so iconic. It's my favorite look for Wolverine. Yeah, I would say for sure that that suit.
Sorry, Daddy, I just wanted to get nerdy for a second.
Of course you do.
Yeah, yeah, no, we could.
Yeah, I'm about to get nerdy about something else that you've worked on
Yeah, yeah.
recently. Just I seen your Instagram, you've been contributing to a Jaws art book. How did
Oh,
that
yeah.
come about? How did you get working on doing art for Jaws? With it being the anniversary this year,
hmm
and yeah, it's great to see. I take it you've gone to watch the re-release on the big screen? Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to see the re-release on IMAX. I wanted to go, but I do a lot of conventions and somewhere between 15 and 20 shows a year. So my schedule between conventions and getting out to the movies, especially when it's like a limited release or a limited window like that. So I missed Jaws in IMAX and I really wanted to see it, but obviously I'm a big fan of the movie because it was just one of those like movies that came out when I was very little and grew up with the movie. It scared me to death when I was a kid. And then, of course, it's, a classic and I grew up loving the movie. But getting to work on the Jaws artwork was really cool. That was through a publisher I've worked with previously on some other projects. And they do these art books, which are like coffee table size books. And they put out, the publisher is called Printed in Blood. And they usually focus on horror and sci-fi compendiums. And they put out they'll put out maybe two or three books a year. And they kind of spotlight different classic cult films or even big movies like Jaws. And the books will feature around like 200 or so brand new illustrations from different artists who are doing like their homage to whatever that movie might be. So I did one for The Thing. I did one recently for The Crow that'll be coming out this year as well. And John Carpenter's The Thing, the classic horror sci-fi movie. And they even did one for Stranger Things a few years ago through Netflix. So I contributed new Stranger Things artwork for that. So they just put out these art books that are these compendiums that I get invited to participate basically. Of course, the artwork has to be approved by the studio, whoever owns the license. But the publisher works with the studio and they put out these books. Yeah, I pitched one for Jaws. I had a fun idea that I wanted to do, and I guess Universal liked it and the publisher loved it. So it's coming out in that art book, which should be coming out really soon. I know the pre-orders started a few months ago. I think the Jaws book is shipping like in the next week or two, I think.
Nice.
Yeah.
What would you say, Joe, is working in Star Wars? What would you say is like your proudest moment as a fan? Has there been like a time where you've like have you ever talked to George Lucas and thought pinched yourself?
Yeah, I've been in the same room where he's been, but I didn't get the opportunity to really speak with him. So mostly what I've done over the course of my career for almost the last 30 years has been, yeah, I work from home a lot on my Star Wars art. So I'm working in my studio and then I do travel and go to different Comic-Con events or Star Wars Celebration. I've been to most of those. I've only missed a few of them. And George has been, he's gone to those as well. And sometimes I've seen him from like over like, oh, there's George like 20 feet away, but I can't really get to him or say hi kind of a thing. I have sat on his couch in his house. If you know, I'm wearing my Skywalker Ranch shirt. I have been to Skywalker Ranch. I can say that I've been through his house. I've been in his living room. I've been in his meeting room. Now, upstairs is off limits. They don't let you go upstairs because that's kind of where he mostly hangs out. But the downstairs area is like the living room. They have like a media room where he does interviews. Then they have the big conference room, which I'm sure everyone's seen in videos when there's a big table and everyone's around it and they have like little meetings in that room. And then there's the library, of course, which is on when you go into Skywalker Ranch. The library is just like it's like its own building. It's incredible. And his artwork collection is just unbelievable. Like, I mean, we're talking like classic 20th century illustrators, and he's got like Norman Rockwell's and N.C. Wyeth's and just incredible, like mind blowing art museum level pieces and just in his house. But yeah, I got to sit on his couch, so which is which is cool. So yeah, I haven't gotten to shake his hand or say hi to him or what a important person he has been in my life. I mean, really, it's crazy to think about one man's imagination really did sort of shape my entire career path at such an early age. And it's not just me. I mean, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of people who've gone on to work on Star Wars or work as creators in the industry or even as musicians or other kinds of artistry. They were inspired by Star Wars, and that's why they do what they do now. I mean, you guys have a podcast because George Lucas created Star Wars. It's amazing that one man created something so incredible and universally loved that it influenced and impacted so many of us all over the world. And I'd love to tell him thank you, in person, but who knows, maybe someday. But yeah, maybe if I get to go back to Skywalker Ranch and if he's there. So
I think it's with Celebration in LA in 2 years.
yeah.
His sort of museum art center opening. I think the opportunity's going to be there, Joe.
Yeah, yeah, I guarantee. I mean, I would say for sure he'll be at Celebration LA in 2027. Also because the Lucas Narrative Museum of Art is opening, and that's in LA, and that's going to be huge. So yeah, I mean, I think there might be a chance to see him there. It just again at these events, I'm like usually stuck at my booth like from morning until close. So I'm at my booth every day, all day. So trying to get out and get a chance to meet him. Yeah, we'll see.
Do you know, is any of your art getting to go into the Narrative Museum of Arts? Have you had any heads up that any of your pieces are going up?
Oh, well, they haven't given me any heads up. I mean, I know that George has bought my artwork. He owns some of my artwork from years back. He bought a stack of stuff that I had done for different publishers back in 2005, actually. So he bought a painting I had done for a book cover. He had bought some of my comic book art I had done for Dark Horse. It's in his collection, it's in his archives. I don't know if it'll end up in like on display in the museum. I have no idea, maybe, but that would be an impossible task probably to reach out to every artist and say,
Yeah.
hey, you have a piece, you know.
Yeah.
So I'll just have to kind of keep my eyes on it and see if anything pops up there. But yeah, that'd be cool. I know some of my art is on display, I think in the Lucasfilm offices, in the office that's in Burbank. At least I've been told that some of my artwork is on display in the Disney Lucasfilm office in Burbank. Yeah, I mean, they kind of rotate that stuff. Especially
Hmm.
even at the Lucasfilm headquarters, like, you know, they have Star Wars licensing art from different artists that have been published over the years, and they'll rotate that around too.
Yeah. It still must be cool, dude, every so often just be like, yeah, that's a little bit of me up on the wall there, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've had artwork featured in like official Star Wars exhibitions that have traveled across the country where they've used my artwork, like they blow it up really big and maybe use it as like a display piece or something. And that just is so awesome. Where I have, you know, friends go to New York City and, hey, I went to the Star Wars costume exhibit and your artwork was, and they'll take pictures and send me. So that's always fun.
There's an art piece, Joe, that I think our fans would really like from you. We here love the mod biker gang from the Book of Boba Fett.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah, the scooter bikes, yeah.
Mhm.
I think if you did that, that's $1 million idea.
Yeah. That was not my favorite scene in Book of Boba, though Sophie Thatcher was pretty easy on the eyes. I'll have to say that. I love her. She's gone on to be in a couple horror films since Book of Boba. It was crazy because I saw her in Companion.
Mhm.
She was in that, and then she was in horror film with Hugh.
Oh, Heretic?
Heretic, yes, that was
Yes.
it. And I was like, wow. And since then, I'm like, now I'm a Sophie Thatcher fan, even though she was in Book of Boba and the biker gang was kind of like, eh. But are you talking about the scooter bikes, right? Not the swoop
Yeah.
gang. Yeah, 'cause there's
Yeah.
the swoop gang that the Slave One takes out. That was pretty cool when the Slave One was shooting the bikers and picking them off. But yeah, the scooter bikes, which were kind of a throwback to the American graffiti days. I mean, I understood what the influence was. It was just kind of that the entire Book of Boba Fett show was kind of hastily put together, so it kind of shows through the in some of the cracks. But
So what you're saying is they need to come back to be redeemed. I like the way you think,
oh
Joe.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I would. Hey, Boba Fett is my second. Well, he's in my. I mean, Darth Vader and Boba Fett are kind of neck and neck for my favorite Star Wars characters. So even though Book of Boba kind of let me down overall, I would. He's still one of my favorite characters. I'd love for how they utilized him in the Mandalorian was pretty great. I love that. So yeah, they can't give up on him. I mean, Tamura is still around. Let's get some more cool Boba Fett stuff out of it. A season two, I don't know if that'll happen, but maybe he'll show up in Dave Filoni's movie or something.
Why is so you sort of said there it alternates between Vader and Boba? Why those two particular characters? We like to ask because again we've spoken about our favorite characters, mine's Obi-Wan
Hmm.
Kenobi, but why those two?
Well, they're both my favorite characters, I would say, for storytelling reasons, but also for design reasons. So, for example, like Vader. Now, you got to remember, I grew up with the classic trilogy, so both of these characters were they were still very mysterious. Even after Return of the Jedi, we still didn't know Anakin's backstory, really. I mean, we just knew he was Luke's father. So the prequels come along, and they start to deconstruct and sort of demystify the characters. But for 20 years there after the classic trilogy, that's a lot of time to really like have a lot of imagination going like what was Darth Vader like? What was Boba Fett like? And where'd those characters come from? And so as a young fan growing up with those two iconic characters, that I mean, you just have to remember like nowadays we know everything about Boba Fett. We know everything about Darth Vader, but back then we still didn't know that much. So for storytelling reasons, I would work with them in my artwork, even during the prequel era, which is when I started really getting published officially anyway, but they were just mysterious characters that were really fascinating to me, even though the prequels did begin to deconstruct the characters and we got more of their background. They were still fascinating to me as a fan. But also, Darth Vader would work really well for my style. Like, he's a very dark, graphic. And when I say graphic, I mean like dynamic lighting, like, light and dark. When you're drawing Darth Vader, there's a lot of shadow, there's a lot of dark shading and coloring on him. So as a comic book artist who worked in a very like dynamic graphic white and black style for my comic book art. Darth Vader would he really suited that look of the like his the design of that character fits really well with my style of drawing. And then Boba Fett, because I also like to be very detailed. Boba Fett has a very detailed costume. It's kind of the opposite of Darth Vader. I mean, not that Darth Vader's isn't detailed, but Boba has so much going on in his costume. There's so many little bits and pieces and the weathering and the little weapons that are hidden everywhere. So as an illustrator, I like to be very detail oriented as well. Boba Fett also kind of answered that part of my style where I was like, oh, I like drawing Boba Fett because, I can have fun just noodling away at all these little details on his armor. And they're both very iconic, like super villain looking characters, with the capes and the helmets and the armor. So they really stood out to me for those reasons. I think that's why I always gravitated towards Darth Vader and Boba Fett. And ultimately, Star Wars is the story of Darth Vader, like the first six films for sure. I mean, even the sequel trilogy, in a way, it all comes back to him. So, yeah, for storytelling reasons, Darth Vader is sort of the center of Star Wars for me. And then Boba Fett's just this really cool, iconic character that, yeah, I just go on and on about Boba Fett, why he's so awesome. But, he was the first new character after Star Wars that we were introduced to as kids when we didn't know anything. We just, Kenner's like, here's a new Boba Fett action figure. And you had to mail off for it, and you get Boba Fett in the mail as a kid, and you're like, who is this really, from the new movie The Empire Strikes Back, which was still a year away. So growing up with that and having that memory of Boba Fett was a big deal too.
You mean your first memory wasn't the Christmas special Boba Fett?
Actually, it was. I just hadn't mentioned that. But yeah, no, that was the coolest part of the holiday special was the Boba Fett cartoon. Yeah, that was the first memory of the character. But that did come out in November of '78. Yeah, that's right. And then the action figure came out about a year before Empire in '79. So it was shortly thereafter we
Hmm.
got the action figure for Boba Fett.
Yeah.
But that was so they're kind of related in a way, the timing. But for me, it was the action figure was just like such a huge deal to get that.
Yeah.
A year before the movie had come out, we all thought Boba Fett was going to be like this really big deal in the movie, and it turns out he's only in a few scenes, but
Yeah.
still, he was such a cool character.
Just kind of going back to what we were talking earlier about the idea of concepts becoming part of the narrative, the concept of Boba Fett being the super commandos, and
Hmm.
then they kind of whittled it down to one bounty hunter, but now we
Yeah,
have the super commandos and Mandalorian, which again, just this continuation of like, let's pluck from what came
right.
before and put it in now.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they did. They with Moff Gideon's commandos in season 3 of Mandalorian, they kind of went back to that idea of the super commando Mandalorian, which is what George wanted to do originally with Boba Fett. But then it became, for storytelling reasons, yeah, he whittled. You're right. He whittled it down to one character. Plus, it would have been a bigger budget to do a bunch of those guys. So it just made sense. Like, oh, I'll just make him a bounty hunter, and he'll be this one-off thing. And of course, that becomes so huge over the years. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Forgive my cat for appearing.
Yeah,
Toast just
that's
coming to
okay.
say
I got a
hello.
couple. I got a couple around here somewhere.
But I think that'll wrap us up for today, Joe. We could honestly talk to you for hours.
Oh yeah, I could talk Star Wars all day. Yeah.
You're such a wealth of information. Next time, we're going to talk Comic Cons.
Okay.
We're going to talk the TV shows. And
Mhm.
then,
Sure.
from what I've figured, you're a big horror fan.
Yeah.
Oh,
Which
absolutely. I
again
love horror
is
movies. Yeah.
we have a whole
Yeah.
separate
Fright
side
Club.
project
Yeah.
for horror as well. So
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. I'm a huge horror geek for sure.
you have done artwork for Supernatural and stuff as well. I
Hmm.
know that there's we talked
Other
about that too.
Yeah, I've done, and the thing is, like, done lots of other stuff besides Star Wars, other sci-fi, like Star Trek and Firefly and stuff. And I love horror. It's just I haven't. I mean, I have done horror artwork over the years. I've worked on horror comic books even, but for me, it's like I need to do more. I need to like Star Wars just kind of takes over my life, which is not a complaint. I love it, but I have to find opportunities to squeeze in something like Jaws, for example, where it's like, I want to Jaws, but I'm working on a Friday the 13th painting right now too. So
Ooh,
yeah,
nice.
for
Yeah.
that's for a new project. So I'm able, I got to find opportunities to squeeze my love for horror into my Star Wars schedule.
But thanks very much, Joe. Is there anything you would like to plug coming up?
Let's see. I got 3 more shows coming up in October, and then I'm done for the year. So I'll be at Dallas Fan Festival is it next weekend? Or no, it's like 10 days. And then after that, I've got New York Comic Con. If any of your listeners in Ireland or over in Europe anywhere are coming to New York Comic Con, I'll be there. And then I'll be in San Antonio, Texas at the end of October for SpaceCon, which is, I think that one's like Ian McDermott's last appearance in the US. So Emperor Palpatine himself will be at SpaceCon, but it's got a really big Star Wars guest list too. There's like Sabine, Shin Hati, Moff Gideon. All these actors are going to be at this convention. There's a lot of Star Wars guests. There's a lot of Marvel guests. And that's SpaceCon in San Antonio. So I'll be at that one at the end of October. And then I've got some new artwork coming out, I think next month from Topps for Star Wars Galaxy, their new trading card series. So I have a lot of artwork in that set, and yeah, and just more Star Wars stuff down the way. So if anyone wants to follow me and keep tab on my new artwork and what's coming out, just follow me from joecorroney.com. All my socials are on there. So if you go to my official site, you can follow me on Facebook or Instagram or wherever.
Nice. And hopefully Joe will get to meet you in person one time and you can sign a print for us.
Yeah, if you come to Celebration, or if I can make it over to Ireland or Europe again. It's been a while, so it's been about 10 years since I've been over there. But for sure, yeah, happily sign some artwork for you guys.
Thank you, Joe. Danny, plugs?
Yeah, we just want everybody to like, follow, subscribe, leave a comment, rate us on all the socials, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Instagram, X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, Fright Club NI, we are screening on Thursday, the 30th of October. We're showing Ghostbusters 2 in the Braid Ballymena. And then Friday, the 31st of October, Halloween night, we're showing Fright Night. So be sure to check that out over at thebraid.com.
And just to plug something for myself, there's a Belfast International Horror Festival. I'm hosting 2 screenings, one on the 24th of Peter Jackson's Brain Dead or Dead Alive, but more importantly than that, on the 23rd, I'll be hosting a screening of Tammy and the T-Rex. A
That's a
classic.
classic. Yo, yeah, I've seen it.
But thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you next episode. But as everybody in the audience knows, and of course Joe mentioned it earlier, we've got friends everywhere. Bye everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
From Kenner's Star Wars collection comes the Stormtrooper, the Sand People, and all 20 action figures, including new Hammerhead, Snaggletooth, and more, each sold separately. And now, Boba Fett, Star Wars villain with his laser rifle. Boba Fett is not yet available in stores, but you can get him free with 4 proofs of purchase from any Star Wars action figures. Details on specially marked packs at participating stores. Offer ends May 31st. Star Wars action figures sold separately from Kenner.